Some people will do anything to prove the supernatural is real, even play with things they don't understand. Today, I'm going to tell you 5 terrifying ritual stories, where every summoning comes with a price, and those who take part realize too late that some doors, once opened, never close again. In the first story, a group of friends decides to test the midnight game and ends up awakening something that refuses to lose. But before we begin, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any chilling stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The first time I heard about the so-called midnight game was in some random video that popped up while I was deep in a late-night YouTube spiral. One of those nights when sleep just won't come. The title was impossible to ignore. Forbidden ritual that summons a real entity. I clicked, assuming it was just another poorly told urban legend, but the deeper I got, the more the idea stuck with me. There was something about that game, a different kind of tension. Almost like the video didn't want to be watched all the way through. The following week, with Halloween creeping closer, I brought it up in a group chat with my friends. We'd already been planning to do something that Saturday night, but nobody wanted to hit the same crowded parties or repeat the usual routine. When I tossed out the idea of the ritual, it was like striking a match in a dark room. Everyone went quiet for a second. Then the jokes started, the teasing, the questions. But one by one, they all started to cave. In the end, there were 4 of us, me, Jess, Tyler, and Eli. Jess was the most into it. The kind of person who's always talking about tarot, crystals, and energies. Tyler was the skeptic, the guy who calls everything bullshit and loves debunking what he calls dumb superstitions. Eli, well, he was usually pretty chill, but you could tell he was more hyped than he should have been. We decided to do it at my place since it was more secluded, and nobody would complain about noise. We spent the whole afternoon prepping. The ritual had very specific rules. Each of us had to write our full name on a piece of paper, light an individual candle, and knock on the front door exactly 22 times, with the final knock landing right at midnight. If any step was off, the legend said, the Midnight Man would come for you first. It felt kind of silly, like we were playing Truth or Dare in high school, but we all took the details seriously anyway. Jess set up the papers and matches, Tyler brought a digital stopwatch to nail the timing, and Eli was in charge of the kosher salt. According to the instructions, if your candle went out during the game, you had 10 seconds to relight it. If you failed, you had to protect yourself inside a salt circle, and no matter what, you couldn't stop moving. Midnight hit. Jess held her candle with both hands like it was some sacred grail. Tyler huffed, already impatient. Eli was shaking a little but pretending to be fine. I was trying to keep it together, but my heart was pounding harder than usual. We lined up in front of the door. I went first. 1, 2, 3, 22. Each of us took our turn, one after another. When the final knock landed exactly as the clock struck midnight, we opened the door and killed the lights. Only the candles stayed lit, their flames flickering in air that suddenly felt heavier. We shut the door, locked it, and started walking through the apartment like the rules said. No stopping. Each of us in a different room. Jess paced between the living room and the hallway. Tyler went to the kitchen, Eli stayed in the guest room, and I stuck to the living area. At first, nothing happened, just the sound of our footsteps, the candles wavering, and Tyler's occasional nervous laugh. 10 minutes passed. 20. Jess whispered mantras as she circled. Eli had gone quiet. I tried to stay focused, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like someone was pressed against the wall, silently staring, waiting. Then a gust of icy air cut through the room. I looked around, thinking a window must have been left open, but everything was locked. My candle flame wavered, and for a second it almost went out. I froze. Cupping my hands around the flame, I willed it to stay lit. When it stabilized, I exhaled, not even realizing I'd been holding my breath. That's when Jess screamed. We bolted toward her. She was pointing down the hallway, eyes wide. "His candle went out," she gasped. "Eli's candle went out." We all turned at once. The room where he'd been was pitch black. Tyler let out a disbelieving laugh. but even he sounded tense. Jess grabbed the salt from the floor and screamed Eli's name. "Relight it, come on! You've got 10 seconds." There was no answer, no sound, nothing. We ran toward the room and saw his silhouette fumbling with a match, his hand shaking. The candle was on the floor. He struck once, twice, nothing. The third match snapped in half. And before he could try a fourth time, Jess's candle snuffed out on its own. Darkness swallowed the room. I tried to relight mine, but the air felt thick like it was sucking up all the oxygen. Then we heard it, a sharp, dry crack from the corner of the room, like someone snapping a thick branch. But it wasn't a branch, it was Eli's neck. Jess screamed, I screamed. We stumbled back, and when my candle finally relit, I caught a glimpse, just for a second, of Eli's body on the floor, twisted in an impossible way, his eyes wide and frozen, like he'd seen something no one should ever see. Jess collapsed, sobbing, scrambling to open the salt container. I yanked her up by the arm, desperate. Tyler stood frozen for a few seconds, not knowing what to do, before he started pacing in frantic circles like that would fix anything. Nobody dared go back into that room. All we knew was we couldn't stop moving. After Eli fell, silence took over the apartment. All you could hear was our ragged breathing, short and fast, like the air had turned to syrup. Jess was shaking so hard she could barely hold her candle. Tyler was still trying to act like none of it was real, but his face betrayed him. His shoulders were tense, his steps short and jerky, sweat glistening on his forehead. I tried to say something, but my voice wouldn't come. My candle flame flickered constantly, and every time it threatened to die, panic clawed up my throat. Jess managed to open the salt and started pouring it on the floor, drawing a circle around us. I stumbled inside with her, nearly tripping. Tyler stopped at the doorway to Eli's room and stared at the body, motionless. "This is a stupid joke," he said, his voice shaking. "Someone's messing with us." Nobody answered. He lifted his candle and started walking away from the circle toward the hallway. "Jess, tell him not to go," I begged, but she just shook her head, muttering a prayer under her breath. Tyler either didn't hear or pretended not to. When he turned the corner, his candle went out. The noise that followed was impossible to describe. A scraping sound, like giant claws dragging through the drywall. Then a whisper. No words, just something too close. "Jess," I grabbed her arm. "He needs to come back." She was crying uncontrollably. "Can't open the door, can't leave the circle." Her candle went out. The cold that rushed in after wasn't like anything I'd felt before. Not the kind that comes from wind, but something that cuts straight through skin and into bone. I grabbed the lighter with a trembling hand and tried to relight the flame, but it wouldn't catch. Every spark died before it reached the wick. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, dragging, coming from the hallway. Jess covered her face, sobbing. I was paralyzed, lighter in hand, heart about to burst. The footsteps got closer until they stopped right in front of us. The room was pitch black, but I could see something. A tall, thin shadow that seemed to stretch endlessly. 2 red dots glowed in the darkness. Eyes. I finally got the candle lit. The flame was weak, but it was enough to see the figure standing at the edge of the circle. It was like a body with no face, just those red eyes fixed on us. It didn't move, just stood there, hunched forward like it was studying our every move. Jess screamed and I flinched, shutting my eyes. When I opened them, she was slumped on the floor, unconscious. I dragged her into the center of the circle, holding her tight. The candle flickered again, nearly going out. Those were the longest hours of my life. I stayed there, frozen, listening to things I couldn't see. Footsteps behind me, breathing in the dark, and a distant laugh that seemed to come from the walls. Every time the flame threatened to die, I begged it silently to stay lit. Then, dawn came. Sunlight started creeping through the window, and everything vanished like it had never been there. The candle went out on its own and the silence returned. The kind of silence that only exists after a nightmare. When I finally managed to stand, I saw Eli's body still on the floor, exactly as before. Tyler was gone. No blood, no footprints, nothing. Just his stopwatch lying in the hallway, frozen at 3:13 a.m. Days later, the police came. They said there were no signs of a break-in. Accidental death, they called it. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. Creepy, right? Tell me what you thought about that story in the comments. Some rituals are far too old to be fully understood. And the worst part is, people still keep trying them. Like in the next story, where what started as a simple game to talk to spirits ended up opening the gates of hell inside a house. I never thought a simple game could shatter the peace of an entire household. It all started one night, when we were bored out of our minds. It was a long holiday weekend, and my cousins had come over to spend the night. We'd spent the day watching movies and scrolling on our phones until Jason, the most curious of us all, showed up with an idea he'd found on some online forum. The Red Book game. He said it was a Mexican ritual for communicating with spirits. At first, nobody took it seriously, but the way he talked, half excited, half terrified, got our attention. He explained that all we needed was a red-covered book, a candle, and absolute silence. It sounded too simple to be scary, but he swore it was real. We headed downstairs to the living room, turned off all the lights, and lit a candle in the center of the table. The book we used was some old romance novel my mom had kept since she was a teenager. The cover was a deep faded red, and the title had long since worn away. Jason said the older the book, the stronger the connection. He talked like he knew what he was doing, and that just made everything feel even weirder. The ritual went like this. Each of us placed a finger on the cover, closed our eyes, and asked the book's spirit for permission to enter. Then we'd ask a question out loud and open to a random page. The first sentence our finger landed on was the answer. It sounded like the dumbest game ever, but there was something different about that night. The air felt heavy and the candle flame flickered even though there wasn't a breeze. Jason went first. He asked if anyone was there with us. The book opened on its own. I swear, none of us had turned the page, and when he read the sentence, we all fell silent. Yes, we're all here. He laughed, trying to play it off, and said it had to be a coincidence. But nobody wanted to go again. For some reason I can't explain, though, I had to try. I asked if the spirit wanted to hurt us. The sentence that appeared was short, but it sent chills down my spine. That's up to you. After that, the candle went out. The flame just vanished, like something had sucked the air out of the room. We sat in the dark for a few seconds until we heard a noise from the door. 3 slow, heavy knocks that echoed through the whole house. Nobody dared to move. When we finally turned the lights back on, the fireplace screen, which weighs nearly 20 pounds, was lying in the middle of the room. At first, we all forced ourselves to laugh, trying to convince ourselves the wind must have knocked it over. But there were no windows open, and the worst part, the book was on the floor, open to the same page as the last question. Jason quickly shut it and told us to stop, that things were getting too intense. After that night, things started to change. Small things at first. Objects disappearing. Things falling for no reason. A glass shattering in the sink on its own. But the worst was the feeling of being watched all the time, especially at night. A week later, my little sister said she saw a boy laughing near the stairs. We brushed it off until her hair was yanked so hard it left a mark on her neck. She cried, saying, "The book boy wanted to play." We tried to tell her it was her imagination, but the laughter always came back as soon as the sun went down. The drawers started opening by themselves, one by one, with a slow, dragging sound, like something was rummaging inside. Sometimes we'd hear footsteps running down the hall, but when we looked, there was no one there. The noise came from the ceiling, the walls, the kitchen. It was like the house had taken on a life of its own. My dad thought someone was trying to mess with us, until he got locked inside his bedroom. The doorknob turned, but the door wouldn't budge. He shouted, pounded on it, and then suddenly, it unlocked on its own. When he got out, he was pale. He said he'd heard voices outside calling his name. The nights after that were hell. The house started to feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. The air was thick, and the silence. It was the kind of silence that hurts your ears. Sometimes I'd wake up to my bed shaking. Other times someone would knock on my bedroom door, but when I opened it, there was only darkness. One night, we heard the sound of heels coming from my parents' room. Slow, rhythmic steps, like a woman walking in circles. When we went in, there was no one there, but the mirror was covered in fingerprints, and the air smelled like old perfume. That was the night we saw her for the first time. Standing at the end of the hallway was a woman dressed in black. Her dress was lace, old-fashioned, and a veil covered part of her face. The light flickered, and with each flicker she seemed closer. When we finally got a clear look at her face, she was smiling. A tight, forced smile like she was trying to imitate a human. Then, everything went dark. My mom reached out to our church. A priest came to the house and blessed every room, sprinkling holy water and praying. For a while, it seemed like the negative energy had faded. Things went back to normal, or so we thought. But the evil hadn't left. The next week, the laughter returned. First, it came from the backyard, then from the attic, and then one night, I woke up to the feeling of someone sitting on the edge of my bed. The mattress dipped slightly. I felt the cold air, the smell of mildew, and something childlike. When I opened my eyes, I saw the same woman's face, but smaller, distorted, with white eyes and the same smile. She touched my shoulder and whispered, "You called me." I screamed so loud my parents came running, but the door was locked again. I heard them trying to break it down, and while they did, drawers and cabinets opened on their own around me. Clothes flew, hangers clattered, and the book, that damn book, was on the table, open, its pages flipping by themselves. When they finally got in, I was on the floor, shaking. The book was burning even though there was no fire. The words were changing before my eyes, like the text was alive. The sentence that appeared was clear: "You never should have stopped." After that, we decided to get rid of the book. We threw it in the trash, burned what was left, but the smell of burnt paper never left the room. Just to be safe, my mom called the priest again, and he told us to leave the house for a few days. He said something was trapped there, feeding on our fear. When we came back, the house was eerily quiet. No noises, no shadows, just silence. But on the first night, my sister woke up screaming, pointing at the corner of her room, saying the boy was there. We ran in, turned on the lights, and there was no one. Just the wind coming through the open window and toys scattered on the floor. My mom prayed out loud, my dad shut the windows, and then everything went quiet. A silence that felt final. Since then, no one has ever mentioned the Red Book again. And honestly, it's better that way. Scary, huh? Sometimes what begins as curiosity ends in despair, when the other side decides to answer. And some people take it even further, like in the story you're about to hear now, where two friends make a pact with an entity in exchange for something they never should have asked for. That night, I had no idea I was helping Paul open a door that would never close again. It all started as one of those late-night conversations when sleep won't come, and curiosity feels stronger than common sense. He pulled me over to look at some old forum, one of those creepy black background red text sites filled with posts about rituals and forbidden games. Buried in all that, there was one title that stood out: The Bargain Game, Risk Something, Get What You Desire Most. The description was simple and terrifyingly direct. Each player needed a die, a lit candle, and a wish. The text warned that if the entity accepted the role, a cold wind would sweep through the room. If the die landed on an even number, the wish would be granted. If it was odd, the price would be paid. The final warning just said, "Never play for another, and never lose the entity's die." Paul laughed it off. I thought it was just another internet legend, but he was obsessed. He said he wanted to try it because he'd lost 2 family heirloom rings, his grandfather's, gone in a fire years ago. He believed if the ritual was real, he could get them back. I tried to talk him out of it, but he already had everything ready. 2 candles, 2 dice, and a circle drawn on the floor in chalk. The air was thick, suffocating. The candle flames flickered even though there was no breeze, and the room felt heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath. Paul turned off the lights, knelt inside the circle, and started reading the instructions under his breath. When he rolled the die, the sound echoed strangely, like the floor was hollow. It landed on 3. Right then, the cold wind rushed past us, but instead of relief, a chill ran down my spine. Paul went pale. He said he'd felt something touch his hand, something cold and rough like dried, cracked skin. He ran to his room to check if the rings had appeared, but nothing, no sign. He rolled again, and again it landed on odd. The next morning, the rings still weren't there. But things got worse. Paul started complaining about hearing whispers from the walls. Sometimes he'd see shadows moving near his bed. I thought it was paranoia, until one night I saw it too. A shadow standing in the corner of the room, human-shaped but faceless. He was frantic, insisting he needed to try one more time. He said if he won, the entity would leave him alone. I tried to stop him, but all he kept saying was, "One last roll, I promise." So he turned off the lights again, lit the candles, and knelt down. This time, the air was even heavier. The silence was absolute, and I swear the sound of the candle burning seemed too loud. Paul rolled the die, and it spun in a circle before stopping. The number didn't appear. The die vanished right before our eyes. The wind blew again, but this time, it came with a sound, like a distant, deep, distorted moan. The candles flickered, and the flames stretched toward the ceiling as if something was breathing there. Paul started crying. I tried to grab my phone to turn on the flashlight, but it shut off on its own. Every light in the house went out at once. And that's when I felt it. I can't explain it right, but a presence like something huge and invisible was there, walking around the circle. The floor trembled slightly, and the sound of slow footsteps was getting closer. Paul whispered, "Help me, help me." But I couldn't move. The air was freezing. A metallic noise came from near the door, like something scratching the wood. Then came that guttural, horrible sound, like a muffled scream from underwater. The first thing I did was run to the kitchen and grab salt. I remembered reading somewhere it could protect you. I spread it across the doors and windows while Paul shook on the floor, repeating that the die was gone and now she's free. She. The entity had a gender now, apparently, and from the way he said it, he knew exactly who she was. The noise got louder, scratching at the walls, the ceiling, like the house was alive. Glasses fell from the shelves. The wall clock shattered. I saw a shadow creeping under the door, but the salt kept it from coming through. Still, I could feel it, a coldness radiating from there, an energy that seemed to pull the air from my lungs. That night never ended for us. We locked ourselves in the bedroom, lying on the floor, listening to the sounds outside. Footsteps, moans, sometimes muffled laughter. Neither of us slept. When the sun came up, the house was normal, silent. But the salt on the doors had turned into a black crust like charcoal. Paul didn't want to talk about the game anymore. He said he was moving away, trying to forget. But forgetting wasn't an option. Over the next few days, he started acting strange, talking to himself, staring at nothing and laughing. Once, in the middle of the street, he started screaming that she was following him. 2 weeks later, he was hospitalized. Diagnosis: psychotic break. But the doctors couldn't explain why his body was covered in bruises, like he'd been grabbed by someone. I visited him once. He looked at me with hollow eyes, his skin gray, and said, "She wants to play again. You rolled the die for me, remember?" That froze me to the core. I'd never realized it, but it was true. In the chaos that night, I'd picked up the die and rolled it, trying to end the game. I thought I was helping, but the rule was clear: never play for another. Since then, strange things started happening in my house. Objects moving on their own, voices whispering my name as I was falling asleep, and a constant feeling of being watched, especially at night. One time, I woke up to the sound of something rolling on the floor. When I turned on the light, there was a die near the door. It was the same kind we'd used that night. And when I looked closer, I saw it had no numbers, just strange, twisted symbols carved into it, like eyes. I threw it away, of course. But the next day, it was back on the kitchen table, covered in dark dust like ash. I started searching for answers, went back to the forum, and found an update on that old thread. Someone had written, "If the entity's die disappears, there's no way to end the game. Pray. And if she appears, don't bargain. God help us." That was the last message before the forum was deleted. Now I keep every light in the house on. No mirrors, no shadows. Even so, sometimes I hear the sound of a die rolling in some corner, like a reminder that the game isn't over. The air changes, gets heavy, and I know she's close. Insane, right? After hearing that, it's pretty clear why some games should never be taken lightly. But kids don't always understand danger. Like in the next story, where a group decided to summon Bloody Mary in a way no one had ever tried before. And before we go on, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying the stories. So hit that like button to let YouTube know, and don't miss the next terrifying tale. We just wanted to prove we were brave. You know those playground conversations where one girl tells a scary story and the others pretend they're not scared? That's how it all started. Someone brought up Bloody Mary, that girl who appears if you say her name 3 times in front of a mirror. But we didn't have a mirror on the playground, so Julia had the brilliant idea to do it another way. She said she'd read that you could summon her by spinning in a circle, holding hands if everyone truly believed. We laughed, but deep down, we were all curious. That Friday, the playground was emptier than usual because half the class was on a field trip. The space felt bigger somehow. The wind rustled through the trees, kicking up dust from the ground, and the sun was bright, but the air felt cold. You know? Julia set it up like a game. She said we'd form 4 circles, one inside the other, with 4 girls in each. I ended up in the second circle facing her. Each group would spin in the opposite direction, and we had to say Bloody Mary 3 times. On the 3rd time, we were supposed to close our eyes and not let go until the wind stopped. It seemed like a silly game, but there was something in the air that made me uneasy. When we started spinning, it felt fun at first. The girls laughed, stumbled, shouted the name like it was a song. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. By the 2nd time, the laughter wasn't as loud. A gust of wind cut through us, cold, sharp, and the sound of giggles turned into whispers. On the 3rd time, when everyone closed their eyes and said the name one last time, the ground seemed to shift. I'm not exaggerating. It was like the whole playground tilted for a second. After that, everything went dark. It wasn't a normal faint. I could still hear the girls breathing, some of them collapsing, but it was like I'd been pulled somewhere else. A noise started at the back of my head, a buzzing, and suddenly I was standing, but not in the playground anymore. The ground was black, the sky too, and the wind came from every direction. In the middle, a figure stood watching me. She was tall, thin, her hair covering her face. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. All I could do was blink, and when I did, she was closer. Her voice came from everywhere at once. It was low, raspy, like it was crawling inside my head. She spoke in slow, dragging English, but one word kept repeating: truth. A shiver ran up my spine. She asked if we believed in her, if we thought we could play with her name like it was a joke. When I tried to answer, my mouth wouldn't open. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the other girls, or what looked like them, all of us trapped staring at the same shadow. Then she lifted her face. I'll never forget what I saw. It was cracked, like glass shattered from the inside. Blood seeped from her eyes, but it didn't fall. It hung in the air, moving slowly. She smiled, wide and unnatural. And when she took a step forward, everything around me started spinning. I woke up to someone shaking me. The playground was full of teachers, and girls were lying on the ground, unconscious. Some were crying, others looked dazed. Julia had scraped her knee, her uniform dirty. They said we'd all passed out at the same time, some of us for over 5 minutes. I didn't remember falling. I only remembered her, the woman. Later that afternoon, parents were called. No one wanted to say what they'd seen. All I know is 3 girls started sobbing when the principal asked what happened. We tried to play it off as a game gone wrong, but no one bought it. One of the girls, Carol, told her mom she'd heard a voice calling her name, and ever since she couldn't sleep with her mirror facing the bed. Julia, who'd organized the whole thing, spiked a fever that night. She told her mom she'd dreamed of someone pulling her hair, someone she couldn't see. For me, the worst part was the silence. In the days that followed, every time I closed my eyes, I saw that cracked face. Sometimes when I was alone in my room, the fan would stop for no reason, and the air would get heavy, like someone was leaning over my shoulder. I tried to ignore it, but one night while washing my face, the light flickered and the mirror fogged up. There was a word written in the steam: truth. I ran out and never used that bathroom alone again. After what happened, we were forbidden from talking about it at school. The counselor said it was mass hysteria, but no one believed that. Some girls missed a whole week saying they couldn't sleep. Julia transferred schools soon after. She said she heard footsteps in her room at night, and something would knock on her window 3 times, always the same rhythm. A while later, Carol told me she dreamed of the empty playground, but with our footprints still in the dirt. In the center, there was a round hole, like something had risen from it. She woke up with a scratch on her arm, a thin cut that bled like it was fresh. The weirdest part? I had the same scratch in the exact same spot. We never talked about it again. But every time the wind kicks up dust on the playground, I remember that day. I remember the feeling of being watched, even when no one was there. It was like she'd gotten stuck there waiting for someone to say her name again. Years later in high school, I ran into Julia on the bus. She looked older than she was, you know. Her eyes were tired, distant. When she recognized me, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We sat in silence for a while, and before she got off, she asked, "Do you still dream about her?" I didn't answer. She just laughed and said, "She still talks to me sometimes." After that, I never saw Julia again. Now, as an adult, I avoid even hearing the name. I don't say it, don't write it, don't let anyone joke about it around me. It sounds silly, but I know what I saw. And it wasn't my imagination. When you mess with things you don't understand, something messes back. Sometimes not right away, but sooner or later it shows up. Creepy as hell, right? I really want to know what you thought of that story. Tell me in the comments, and if you've ever experienced something similar, share it too. Sometimes the real fear isn't in the legends, but in the scars they leave behind. I was 12 when I first got obsessed with rituals that promised to summon spirits. Back then, the internet still felt like a gateway to the unknown, full of forums and videos about challenges no one should ever actually try. At first, it was just curiosity. I read about the Midnight Man, the elevator game, and even Kokori-san, the Japanese version of the Ouija board. But nothing ever happened to me. No candles flickered out on their own, no voices answered. It was frustrating, like I was invisible to the other side. Then one day, a kid at school told me about a ritual he swore was different. It was called Dollface. He claimed he'd tried it, and something had followed him for a whole week. I thought he was exaggerating, of course, but the way he talked about it left me unsettled. That night, I looked up everything I could find on the ritual. The stories said it was dangerous, something you could only do once, and if you didn't follow the rules exactly, you risked losing your mind. The ritual itself seemed simple, at least in theory. You had to take a bath in the dark, close your eyes, and repeat a phrase while imagining a woman falling and hitting her head on the edge of the tub. The next day, she'd follow you, and you'd have to escape by saying the right words. It sounded like a mix of superstition and macabre make-believe. That night, I decided to try it. I waited until everyone was asleep, locked the bathroom door, and turned off the lights. The tub was old, white porcelain, with the faucet dripping slowly. I remember the cold as I stepped in, the warm water touching my knees, and the muffled sound that seemed to come from the walls. I took a deep breath and started repeating what I'd read. Halfway through, I got distracted. I think I messed up the order of the words. I felt stupid and ended up laughing, convinced I'd ruined it. I got out, dried off, and went to bed, sure it was just another failed attempt. But that night, I dreamed. In the dream, I was back in the bathroom. The light flickered, and the water in the tub was dark with something floating in it. When I looked closer, I saw a woman. Her black hair covered her face. Her dress was torn and her body trembled as if she were slowly rising. She turned her head toward me and smiled. It was a crooked, impossible smile. Suddenly, she leaned forward and grabbed my wrists. I felt the water swallowing me, and the sound, it wasn't water. It was the sound of bones creaking. I woke up screaming. My mom rushed into my room, turned on the light, and said I looked pale. I tried to explain the dream, but the words came out jumbled. I spent the whole day feeling like something was watching me. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, just that it was there, always one step behind. The next day on my way home from school, I saw something that made me stop in the middle of the street. Behind a tree, across the way, stood a woman. She had the same long dark hair, and her dress looked wet. I blinked, and she was gone. I told myself it was my imagination, but when I got home and went into the bathroom, the faucet was running, and the water had a faint grayish tint. The following nights turned into torture. I dreamed of her, always pulling me into places I'd never seen before. A hallway with cracked tiles, a staircase covered in black vines, a tub in the center of a room where the water moved on its own, as if it were alive. Sometimes I'd wake up soaked. It wasn't sweat. The sheet smelled strange, damp, almost like something rotting. I started avoiding sleep. I'd stay up until dawn, but the exhaustion only made things worse. Once, I swear I heard slow footsteps coming from the bathroom, even though the door was locked. My dad said it was all in my head. My mom started placing little charms around the house. One day, she brought in a priest to do a spiritual cleansing. The man moved through the rooms in silence, murmuring prayers until he reached the bathroom. He stopped in front of the tub and stood there, motionless, for a good few seconds. Then he looked at my mom and said only, "This energy didn't start here." I never forgot the tone of his voice. We moved houses soon after. I thought it would fix things, but it didn't. The nightmares came back. I'd dream I was underwater, the liquid growing thicker and thicker. Black vines wrapped around my arms and legs. In the darkness, I could hear something breathing. It was like she was waiting for me, patient, certain that one day I'd stop fighting. The worst was when the dream changed. One night she didn't wait. She pulled me straight into the tub and held me under. I felt the air run out. The panic was real. I clawed, kicked, bit. I fought with everything I had, and for the first time I broke free. I woke up drenched, my chest burning, my whole body shaking. It was like I'd actually climbed out of the water. The next morning there were red marks on my wrists, like fingers pressed into my skin. After that, I developed a phobia of water. Quick showers, never closing the curtain, and I never stepped into a bathtub again. Even the sound of rain made me tense. I tried to move on, but the feeling of being watched never left. Sometimes, out of nowhere, the smell of stagnant water fills the air. Other times I hear a faucet dripping, even when it's dry. I've tried to rationalize it, tell myself it was just trauma, a mix of childhood fear and imagination. But part of me knows she's still around. Years later, I went back to Japan to visit my grandma. Her house had one of those old-fashioned tubs, just like the one from when I was a kid. On the first day, I went into the bathroom just to wash my face. The faucet was leaking, and the water dripped in an uneven rhythm, like it was calling me. When I turned it off, I noticed something at the bottom, thin, dark vines creeping along the edges as if trying to climb out. I stepped back, and the reflection in the mirror changed. For a second, I swear I saw a face behind mine. The same crooked smile, the same wet hair covering half her face. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just locked the bathroom door and said I wasn't feeling well. That night, I dreamed again. She was standing in front of me, motionless, with sunken eyes and gray skin. She reached out, and I realized the water was rising around my feet, covering the bedroom floor. I woke up to the sound of something dripping from the ceiling. When I turned on the light, there were wet marks on the wall, like someone had dragged a damp hand across it. Since then, she's never really gone away. It's like the ritual opened a door that won't close. I've tried every kind of blessing, burned incense, said prayers, consulted priests. Nothing changes. I've just learned to live with the feeling that in some dark corner, she's still watching, waiting for the right moment to appear again. I don't dare to dream anymore, because every time I close my eyes, I hear that sound, the same slow drip of water, like someone is in the tub waiting. So I have to say it. Don't play doll face. No matter how much it seems like a game, it's not. Some things can't be undone, even when you try to forget. Some supernatural experiences stick to you like a shadow. And sometimes, the worst part isn't seeing what's on the other side. It's knowing it's already seen you first. If you've made it this far, you've probably realized some rituals never truly end. They just change form. You can almost feel the weight of the water, can't you? Leave a like if these stories kept you hooked till the end, and comment "completed ritual" so I know you made it through them all. Subscribe to the channel to keep hearing stories no one else dares to tell. And there's another video right here with more supernatural encounters. Click it, and I'll see you there.